for all to me. You are the pain, all the way, all the way. The fight to all, my life, the love, you're taking it all the way.
Welcome to the Sleeper Wire Show, everybody. Professor Chris and Nader here with you as usual on this beautiful Thursday night. How's it going, Nader? Did you have a good night?
A T-minus playoff time. Right now, we got the first game of playoff time going on right now, and it just became 7-0 as soon as I flipped the switch. So I'm equally nervous and excited at the same time.
Who's winning? I do not have the game on my computer right now.
The Rams scored a touchdown with and right now there's only 11 minutes left on the clock, so they scored a quick one. I don't know how they did it. I have no idea how they did it. I just turned it on and 7-0, and now I'm equally nervous.
Well, I will have to look that up here. We also have special guest Peter Howard on the show, host of the Dynasty Crossroads podcast and senior writer for Dynasty League Football. You can find him on Twitter at PA Howdy. Peter, how's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, what's new? What's happening? What are we doing here again?
We have a few segments that we're going to be talking about tonight. That is a good segue into, the next thing I was going to say. As you guys know, we like to do something a little bit different each week. We get away from the normal weekend preview shows that you'll hear on almost all other podcasts, just the same thing going through the matchups. We don't like to do that. We're going to be talking about players to pick up now for your playoffs in case of injury, what to do if you have a first round bye, and playoff streaming defenses. But before we get into that, guys, Sleeper Wire's a ton of stuff going on right now. Check out our Patreon if you want to win a signed Chris Godwin or signed Kenny Golladay jersey. Once we reach 100 patrons at patreon.com/sleeperwire, we will randomly pick one person, announce them on the show, and then they'll get their choice, Chris Godwin or Kenny Golladay. You get to choose. And even the $1 tier gets you in. So patreon.com/sleeperwire, check it out, get into the contest. Also, check out the Sleeper Wire store. Ton of stuff over there right now. And I believe right now you can get 15% off your order at sleeperwire.com/store. Well, guys, first thing I want to talk about here is the news for the week. First, big news, this broke today. Christian McCaffrey apparently tweaked a thigh muscle last week, and it tightened up on Wednesday when he returned to practice. In breaking news today, he is not expected to play this week. Peter, man, did this affect any of your teams?
No.
Well, that was a quick
No, I didn't have Christian McCaffrey on most of them. I mostly sell running backs when they hit peak value. And Christian McCaffrey hit peak value of all running backs ever at one point. So I've vacated all my Christian McCaffrey shares. I guess fortunately this year, unfortunately for those facing the playoffs now, who might have been hoping to have him back.
Nader, what about you? How many shares of Christian McCaffrey do you have?
I happen to have a pretty decent amount of McCaffrey shares, and going into the last few weeks, I just said as long as I make playoffs, I'm winning the championship because that's when Christian McCaffrey comes back. And I was so convinced that's it. I won. Every league where I had him in, I was so convinced I won the championship right then and there because how Yahoo, they love putting their projections, and the ESPN does that now. I mean, at minimum, the worst league, it was a 140 projection with Christian McCaffrey in my lineup. And so I sat there convinced, and this is really sad to hear.
Even though projections don't mean a thing.
They don't, but they definitely they mean something in your heart.
It's good to see. Like you see it, and you're like, oh, thank God.
You see my team?
It's Sunday morning. I'm projected to win by 20, and then you might lose by 30.
Yeah, but the result doesn't matter. The projection, it's all that matters.
Fantasy football, the result doesn't matter. All that matters is what you hoped happened going into the game.
Because then you have excuses, right? If you're projected to win and you lose, you have excuses like, oh, my team didn't perform. I had an injury here, or this, that.
Right.
You got excuses.
Well, I have a share of Christian McCaffrey in a 16-team Dynasty League. I had the 101. It was a startup this year. So that was kind of a bummer. And in my money league, I hit 11-2. had Christian McCaffrey in that league, and I've actually lost the super flex. I've lost McCaffrey, Dak, Joe Burrow, and now Antonio Gibson. And I'm still 11-2. So I'm hoping I have the first round bye this week. So I'm hoping next week Christian McCaffrey comes back and I don't have to start Sam Darnold or Mike Glennon in my super flex spot. So
this actually dovetails really well into a later question that you have, but also I was just on the Open Bar podcast and we were talking about flipping the value if you're in your championship and in the hunt for a win this year. And I specifically brought up Mike Davis as someone who had no dynasty value, and so I was having a hard time moving him on teams where I'm not going to win. And we were talking about how you maybe should flip the expectation of who should lose and who should gain value in dynasty trades if you're looking to win your championship this year. Because anyone who wouldn't trade a second or a Darnell Mooney for Mike Davis 2 weeks ago because you could have had him for that little or less, like now would be a nice time to have him.
That's actually a really good idea.
Peter, I got a question
for you. Now it just went up, baby.
We have a question here in the chat from George, one of our guys here at Sleeper Wire. And this is a good question for you as a dynasty guy. He is saying, when will Zeke hit peak value? Or has that already happened?
That happened a while ago, man. Sorry, that happened a while ago. It's an interesting question right now, whether you acquire, hold, or sell Zeke in Dynasty. Honestly, running backs, it's always a sell window for running backs. And I know that's hard to hear since you need running backs to win. You literally need them to win, even in 2020. But Zeke hit probably the peak value after year one because he hit year one. Most running backs, especially from the first round, hit their ceilings in year one. You can expect that to continue. And as we've been pushing, specifically this offseason, at least my little Twitter bubble got a lot smarter, and so it got a lot harder in Dynasty to recognize that players like Melvin Gordon and even Todd Gurley, who I know he's had a rough year, they do still keep producing, but in terms of their ceiling production, and also their ceiling value, it's really year 1 and 2, especially if they hit early. And the exceptions to that rule are Derrick Henry, which has also happened in 2020. He broke out late for a running back, especially with draft capital, and he's continuing to confound expectations in 2020. So there's always that chance you lose, but that's really where the window is for running back value and production.
Let's move on here. The Chicago Bears paused in-person football activities on Thursday due to a positive COVID test. That is something you're going to want to keep an eye on. Hopefully it is, it was someone who was staff, not really involved with players or anything like that. And, we're going to have Allen Robinson and David Montgomery this week for our fantasy teams. Mark Andrews has been activated off the COVID list, so it'll be good to have him back. Josh Jacobs practiced on Wednesday, so it looks like the Devontae Booker experiment is done. Nader, how many leagues did you start Devontae Booker?
None. I mean, the matchup was great against the Jets, but sometimes backup running backs are backups for a reason, so just not nearly as good as a starter. Luckily, I wasn't forced to do it. I highly recommended people do it. Unfortunately, it bit people in the butt right after. But I'm very glad to see him gone.
Alexander Madison all over again, right?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because again, I'm sorry to skip ahead, but to a question you have later, or we were planning to talk about later, do you have something that you use to try and distinguish between which running backs are backups for a reason and which running backs are backups because their starter is the starter? Like, where's what do you look for? Is there anything in particular? It's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah, you're correct. But he was a 3rd-round draft pick. He lost his job to Philip Lindsay, and they signed Melvin Gordon and released Booker on the Broncos. Of course, I'm talking about, which means the coaching staff probably knows a little something about his talent and his potential, whether he can't hit a hole to save his life, whether he doesn't know how to pass block. And then you come onto the Raiders, and even with a hurt Josh Jacobs, Jalen Richard has taken some carries and some pass catching ability. It just goes to show that, maybe you're a backup for a reason. Because let's face it, if he's talented, he'll be he'll find a way to be on the field.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think that's a good way of looking at it. Look at the flow of their career, right? I mean, what's kind of happened, but then you get someone like Kalen Ballage, who I think everyone will be pretty happy to say, yeah, he was a backup for a reason the first few years, but then he is one of those running backs that steps in, and we had decent production out of him for a few games. So I was just wondering if you guys had an edge there. It's just difficult, all right?
I think you also have to look at the quarterback and the wide receivers around him. Typically, I always say, if you have a good quarterback, you got good wide receivers, your running back's going to be productive regardless of talent. And Justin Herbert, he's been killing it the past month and a half. The Keenan Allen one side, Mike Davis on another side with Hunter Henry as a tight end. He's not facing stacked boxes. They got to worry about stuff on the outside. So it gives him an opportunity to actually make plays in the running game. And you see Austin Eckler, now that he's back, he's continually making plays in the running game.
You mean Mike Williams across from Keenan Allen, right?
Sorry, yes. I may have said that.
Not Mike.
Sorry.
Antonio Gibson is doubtful for Sunday's game against the 49ers with turf toe. Apparently, it's a pretty severe case of it. That's a bummer. So, Peter, J.D. McKissick or Peyton Barber, are you hoping for PPR points?
Oh, wow, what a rough question. As far as two running backs, I never thought I'd have to have a big opinion on. I think Peyton Barber of the two. If I'm looking for a floor, which tends to be what I'm looking for if I'm just trying to stuff someone in late, I'll go with the guy with the rushing floor, and I think that's much more Peyton Barber than it is J.D. McKissick. I mean, McKissick's been sucking up a lot of receiving volume, even without a missing person on the depth chart, and so that's interesting. But I think Peyton Barber's a more, capable rusher than J.D. McKissick is in anything. I'm not a big fan of J.D. McKissick overall. So, yeah.
Even in a PPR? Because he killed it with Alex Smith for 2 or 3 weeks there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I mean, it was 29 targets in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Would you own 30% of the target share?
For the whole team?
So sometimes you might have to go with the receiving back. In my opinion, I'm going to go Jerick McKinnon. Especially, and maybe not typically, you would go the pass catching back, but when Alex Smith is the quarterback, I think that tips the scale a little bit, considering
J.D. McKissick.
J.D. McKissick, sorry.
Not Jerick McKissick.
No, my pronunciation is terrible today.
Yeah, what's going on?
What's going on?
You know what? Let's take some time here.
Nader,
Nader, what's going on with you, man?
Oh man, I rushed in from work. I have to rush it. I'm holding in my bathroom pee. I'm on a full stomach. It's all bad. It's all bad. But
a few years ago when I first started the Great Debate podcast, we were doing an episode that had Doug Martin in it. And I was arguing for Doug Martin. This was a summer Great Debate, so it was who to draft. This was several years ago. And for nearly the entire time I was arguing, I kept saying Doug Baldwin, like the whole time.
The problem is there's a lot of NFL players with similar names, and all you have to do is mess up once, and then it's just going to get in your head, and you're just going to repeat and repeat and repeat.
Well, you think about how many Devontaes we have.
There's a lot of Devontaes.
Booker, Devonta Freeman, Devontae Parker,
There's
Devontae
like
Adams.
There's like 4 Mike Williamses. We don't have to go that far. There's like 4 people with the exact same name. But Nader, man, I just want to give you a little boost of confidence here. You don't have to take this. You're being reasonable and all having fun with it. But you could just tell them, look, man, you don't have to be such a pronunciation Nazi. It's okay to get a name wrong.
Okay.
What I'm saying is right. Stand up for yourself. I got you, man.
Yeah, Peter, you're a real one.
It is okay to get a name wrong, and I'm going to call you out on it. You say Jerick McKissick in a game against the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners, they have a great rush defense, which is also why I want to stay away from Peyton Barber. So J.D. McKissick would, in my opinion, be at a better play because I think he is just safe, a safe pass catcher, a good pass catcher. And when Alex Smith is the quarterback, he makes tight ends like Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker. And he, in my opinion, he made Travis Kelce what he is. And then now Logan Thomas.
Yeah, George in the comment section here is also pointing out we literally right now have 2 Michael Thomases.
And Santiago on YouTube said all the Devontaes are spelled differently. Yes, they are.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
which is actually a saving grace. If you do a lot of statistics, especially doing historical stuff, a lot of the problem is trying to separate out those guys. Like there's 2 David Johnsons and one's a tight end. And there's actually 2 Adrian Petersons, which gets really weird when Adrian Peterson's stats don't come out. And you're like, what's going on there? It's because of this Adrian Peterson you've never heard of before. So that's, the reason for having ID columns, which are difficult to create, maintain, and transfer across databases. So, just a little nerd anger for you here. Yeah. Could everyone have a different name? Is that so much to ask?
There's also 2 Lamar Jacksons, which is something you just won't expect, but it happens to be that way.
I will say a couple years ago in a friends home league, just a free league, not a money league, but just a friends league, I tried to trade David Johnson, the Steeler, to get something good. It was like 3 years ago, but it didn't work out. They caught it.
Nice.
Well, and even this year, you can send D Johnson in a trade, and if people see Texans, they don't know if it's David Johnson or Duke Johnson. They might just click yes or no.
Now you have to add the second letter of the name, and it gets really bizarre. D.A. Johnson or D.U. Johnson?
Well, guys, it is J.D. McKissick for me. Let's go ahead and move on here.
I think that's fair. And just to point out, my projections as well as 2 of the stat services say to lean J.D. McKissick over Peyton Barber, so I guess I'm just weird. I'm just remembering the start of the season because I drafted him, or I added him off the waiver wire for some reason in like the Scott Fish Bowl, and he put up like 14 PPR points, and I guess I've just got like reverse trauma from that one good game he had. I don't know.
Yep. Dez Bryant was pulled off the field Tuesday before the Ravens-Cowboys game after the team found out he tested positive, and then he quit. He just said, I'm done with football. And then it came out today that it was a false positive. So do we have any more news on Dez? Has he returned or is he done? Was it just a tantrum or is he officially done?
Today he did not show up at practice. I think he's visibly frustrated because this could have been his one chance to coming back in the NFL, and it was just taken away from him in a blink of an eye. I would imagine the Ravens would give him another chance in next offseason to make a name for himself on the starting roster, but it could be very safe to say he's done in football now.
Well, I would imagine they'd give him another chance to come back and play this season if he wanted to. I mean, it's got to be hard when you worked this hard to come back. A team finally signs you, and then you test positive in week 13, and you have to miss weeks 14 and 15 because you're in the COVID protocol and you have to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
got to be frustrating. But since it was a false positive, I would think the Ravens would welcome him back, and it was just a frustration, I'm done, thing.
You have to also, you're glad it's a false positive, but you have to think like he tested positive before the game. I'm really surprised they played the game.
Yeah. Why did they continue on? Maybe it was just that game had been postponed so many days.
They were just like, you know what? If somebody else gets it, somebody else gets it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. They kept postponing the Ravens game, but when all 3 Denver quarterbacks are out, they're like, you know what? We're still going to play.
I guess it just goes to show if you're just not important enough, it does not matter.
Could be. Well, it's in our last piece of news. We had 3 big name players who did not participate in practice on Thursday: Mike Evans, Julio Jones, and of course, Antonio Gibson. Can we expect to be without Mike Evans and Julio, or do you guys think they're going to play this week? Peter, I'll kick this one to you first.
Sorry, guys, answering a question in the chat. Which specific news story are we talking about right now?
Mike Evans and Julio did not practice this week.
It's difficult, especially the year of COVID or the year of, increased player volatility to know what to do. And generally, I'm sticking to my guns with if I think a player is healthy and if that player is good, I start them. Okay. Julio Jones, if he's back, like last week, I had him lower in my projections, Julio specifically, because I didn't think he was fully back. And if this injury makes you think he's still struggling to get back, then it's fair to put him back into the questionable tag. Maybe I don't start him this week.
Sure.
But, when Austin Eckler comes back, when Christian McCaffrey came back from that one glorious instance, if I think they're healthy, I'd let it stop affecting me. But with Julio specifically, he seems to be struggling a little bit this year. Mike Evans, I haven't read up on specifically that injury as much, so it's hard to know. And especially on that Tampa Bay depth chart, it's okay to be a little more concerned just because opportunity can go at least two other ways that are pretty enticing for a quarterback.
But is Chris Godwin going to be back this week? I don't think he plays this week.
He practiced fully today. I don't know how, but
I think he's playing.
I don't know. He had 10 pins surgically removed from his hand yesterday or 2 days ago, and he's practicing full.
Well, is he just going to catch them all with his other hand?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know how. I don't know how that happened. Mike Evans, he practiced yesterday in a limited fashion. Today, he did not practice. That probably means his hamstring didn't do something good for him. And either he's resting it or it's a pretty bad sign of things to come from.
Nader, for what it's worth, it was a Jared Goff 1 yard touchdown run.
Oh, that's so impressive. That's amazing.
Quarterback sneak for the first
that did absolutely nothing for everybody. I mean, you have Cam Akers out there, you got Malcolm Brown, you got Cooper Kupp, you got Gerald Everett, and you take a QB run in. Horrible play design, horrible play calling. Sean McVay.
How'd you leave out Robert Woods, man?
Oh, I'm going against him in a huge money league, so he can't touch the ball.
Well, guys, we need to wrap up the news here. Let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk briefly about Pristine Auction. They have hundreds of daily auctions for all kinds of memorabilia. It is free to join and free to bid, and you only pay when you win. And right now, you can get $5 off your first item by entering promo code SLEEPERWIRE. Visit pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com. All right, guys. Peter, Nader, we have 3 segments I want to go through tonight. First one is guys to pick up now. So what I want to do here is for each of us to talk about 2 guys who are most likely on waivers still, even if they had a good week last week, most likely still on waivers, who are good to pick up now in case of an injury to the starter. And Peter, as our special guest, I'm going to let you go first. Let's each do one player at a time.
Oh, yeah, please let me jump on the swords first. That's fine. No, when I first read this question, because you let me know what was coming, just not to tell everyone the secrets that this isn't off the top of my head, but I actually missed a sentence on this question, which was, if the other player gets injured. Like, it's kind of an if opportunity opens up, who do you want on the back of your roster kind of a question. Am I reading that right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
correct.
Yeah, I went the other way. And just to point out, in my target share article this week for DLF, I was actually writing about Colin Johnson as a pickup this week, and maybe even Cole Kmet, especially from a dynasty perspective, because they've been increasing in their role significantly over the last few weeks. But both of them might be on the waiver wire now, and so it's not an in case of emergency break glass kind of a player. And so what I was doing sorry about the annoying tapping, by the way, that I've been doing is trying to pull up basically running backs, because that's who I'd be trying to stack my depth with at this point. If I'm going into the playoffs, I'm seeking running back help or running back backups or running back improvements. That's really where my mind goes. And like we were talking about earlier, this is where I thought it dovetailed. It's hard to distinguish between running backs that are backups for a reason or ones that might actually be good and just can't get opportunities. And the one thing that I can say is running backs who have done it before have at least proved they're capable of it. And so the ones that come to my mind, first of all, are the ones who've had the highest amount of opportunity this season because of injuries before. And now you just mentioned that Christian McCaffrey's out, so I'm guessing he's not on the waiver wire anymore, but that was my first answer. But 2 others that run to mind are DJ Dallas and also Benny Snell, because we saw them take up that role when the starter went down earlier in the season. So we know they may do that again if it were to happen.
Now, Seattle has activated, or they will be activating Rashad Penny. Does that change your opinion about DJ Dallas?
Don't tempt me. Okay. I have been owned so hard by Rashad Penny through the course of his career in Dynasty. He had less than a 1% shot of not having at least a top 24 season through his first 3 years. That was the line, and I'm still getting routinely owned for that line. So I would love for Rashad Penny to come back and actually get opportunity in Seattle. I just don't. Yeah, hopefully it happens one day, but at this point, there's no reason for me to think it's going to be next week.
All right, so you did mention 2 players that you had originally thought about, but you have Nader, let's go ahead and move to you, because I see in the show notes here you got 2 good ones.
Yes. So the big one is going to be Kiki QT. He's owned in about 50% of leagues. And we saw last week he did blow up for a huge game. in a bad matchup, I should say. This is against Indianapolis, where he had over 100 yards, handful of catches, and he should have got a touchdown. He got down, I believe, on the 2 or 3 yard line, where that could have been easily taken in for a score.
Not against my Colts D.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is one of the cases where sometimes you don't believe in the wide receiver. You believe in the quarterback, and you believe in Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson, he's going to will QT to put up 100 yards receiving. No matter the talent of QT, Deshaun Watson is going to create him some fantasy points.
Deshaun fumble on the goal line, Watson.
Yeah, we're ignoring that part.
Oh, man, I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's terrible.
My first player is going to be Zach Moss. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there have Zach Moss, but according to Yahoo Leagues, he's only 51% owned. And in Buffalo, Devin Singletary still the starter there. But if Singletary goes down, they don't have anyone else who's going to handle the workload. If Devin Singletary gets hurt, let's face it, the Bills have a good offense this year. Zach Moss is going to get a ton of work. Pick him up now if you can, just in case Devin Singletary gets hurt. Peter, you have another guy for us?
I mean, yeah, I can come up with some if you want, but I don't have one that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Again, I mentioned Cole Kmet before. That's definitely not a redraft move, although he has kind of taken over that role over the last 3 weeks from Jimmy Graham, interestingly. But I don't know I'd be starting him in my championships unless I was absolutely desperate. So that's probably not a take for this show. And also, very clear, I don't understand the waiver wire redraft leagues, because like McCall Hardman and those guys won't be on the waiver wire in the Dynasty League, so I'm just starting to realize how out my depth I am.
Yep, and you're definitely a Dynasty guy.
Sorry.
I do want to fully agree on Cole Kmet, especially for Dynasty. I was very high on him coming into the draft. I even took him in the 3rd round of my Dynasty League draft because I thought he was just going to be really good, and I think he is a really good tight end. And I mean, he has doubled Jimmy Graham snaps over last week, and he completely eclipsed Jimmy Graham snaps this week. And I mean, he even had himself a red zone target. I think if not later on to the year, I think he's going to be the complete starting tight end for next year for Dynasty.
He's not on waivers though in Dynasty Leagues.
Probably not. Actually, well, now he probably is.
He might be. That's the thing. I was going to say the opposite. I was entirely uninterested in most of the tight ends in this class. Cole Kmet was up there because it was such a poor class. Relative to his class, I was interested in him. But this year, we've got an interesting list of like 3 rookie tight ends that have had above expected volume in their rookie season, which is really rare for a rookie, in my opinion, behind more fantasy relevant players. And there's Cole Kmet with Jimmy Graham, and he's been a streamable option this year. And yet, like you were just saying, he's been really impressive the last few weeks. You're right. But you've also got like Harrison Bryant, and the other one was Albert O, who I'm not even going to try. Sorry, I'm not. Albert O behind Noah Fant there. Like all 3 are behind probably better assets and better players, but they have all had more target share than you would typically expect for a rookie tight end, especially a class that I at least felt pretty low on. So I don't know. It's an interesting list just to know. Again, throwing a Dynasty take out there. Sorry, guys. But it's kind of interesting how we've got 3 players have all done that this year.
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty rare. Nader, who is your second player?
McCall Hardman, 24% owned in Yahoo Leagues. If Tyreek Hill goes down, he's a wide receiver 2 at worst, especially in that offense. Sometimes you got to go after the high-powered offenses, and you go after the players in the high-powered offenses. Sometimes, you're there because of talent, and sometimes you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. McCall Hardman would be one of those players.
And my second player, Jamal Williams, 61% owned in Yahoo Leagues. Look, guys, if Aaron Jones goes down, I know that A.J. Dillon's activated off the COVID list today, but if Aaron Jones goes down, it's not AJ Dillon getting all the work. Jamal Williams is going to be very involved. He's already really involved. He's already a startable asset as technically the backup player. I have a league where you have to start 3 running backs, and I had I forget who it was who went down, but I've been starting Jamal Williams every week for 10 weeks now, and he always gets
Edmonds on that same list.
Yes, that would be correct.
Chase Edmonds, almost the exact same story. I'm starting him in leagues, despite the fact he's a back. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
You're good. And and Latavius Murray would be in that same boat as well. But yeah, if Aaron Jones happens to get hurt, I would definitely recommend having Jamal Williams. Even if you think you're going to play against Aaron Jones, or if you have Aaron Jones, he's a good guy to pick up. And I was going to throw a quarterback in there real quick, Chad Henne. He's a good backup. If Pat Mahomes goes down, you're going to want to start him, especially if it's a super flex league. Grab Chad Henne off waivers this week before Sunday, so you don't have to spend any fab in case you have Pat Mahomes and Henne gets hurt, and Mahomes gets hurt.
I do think that's actually a sneaky great idea. Now, I do want to say, Peter, you mentioned how do you decipher a good running back or a bad running back in the backup role? I think those 3 options that we mentioned earlier, whether that was Chase Edmonds, Jamal Williams, and Latavius Murray, I think those are ones that are good running backs that just happen to have somebody better right in front of them.
The thing is, Alexander Madison would have made that list for me too, and the one time chance he had. I mean, that's a great. Like I say, I'm not saying I got a better process. It's just interesting for me to know how other people try and work this unworkable solution. Like something I was thinking about with Moss and Williams, and even the guy like Chase Edmonds. Like something that I've seen happen before is like a Royce Freeman. Not Rashad Penny, dang. You've got him in my head now. Philip Lindsay scenario where they were basically splitting the opportunity in that rookie year for Philip Lindsay, but when one of them was out, the other one didn't exponentially increase. And so I've also got it in my head that sometimes they're splitting the works. They both help each other out, but they're not going to excel without the other either. And so I don't know. Tough, man. You gotta watch the tape. Okay, just watch and see who's impressive, I guess.
But Latavius was great without Alvin Kamara last year.
That's true.
Chase Edmonds was great without David Johnson last year.
Jamal
Williams can definitely handle it. But you mentioned Alexander Madison, right? We've seen games without Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
When Alexander Madison started, and it wasn't impressive. He looks better with Dalvin Cook in the lineup.
It might be that situation. It's hard to admit though, because I do like Alexander Madison. He's shown some things, but you're right. When he's had the chances, it hasn't come through.
You also have to think about there's some stuff that, of course, they produce fantasy points, but there's some stuff that happen onto the field that there's not, like pass blocking, route running, and being able to identify a blitz, which also goes into pass blocking, and then even run blocking if it has to be needed. Somebody like Saquon Barkley, he might be a powerful runner, a great runner. He is a horrible pass blocker. If Antonio Gibson made a proper pass block on Jabril Peppers, then I forgot his name, the quarterback's name, Kyle Allen, he would still be playing for the Redskins. And if 2 years before that, the backup running back for the Redskins, unfortunately, I do not remember his name, he made a proper pass block, then Alex Smith would not have gone through 11 different procedures and lost half his leg. So stuff like pass blocking is one of the reasons why running backs don't play their full potential. And then some players like Jamal Williams, he is a great pass blocker. He is also a great a pass catcher, which is why you see him a lot of the times in third down scenarios. While Aaron Jones, why he might be the better running back, he gets his scenarios there. And then, of course, they help each other out by covering up each other's weaknesses, and then they don't get exploited when they're there the whole game.
Who was that missed that block? Was that Samaje Perine?
That was not Samaje Perine. I do not remember the name.
You know, we talked about this season, didn't we?
We did. We've talked about this before. You know what? I will look it up just because now you got me curious.
Again, back to my hobby horse I'm riding over here because I think it's pretty and I look pretty on it. I guess it is difficult. Running back is such a difficult position where so much of the volume is given rather than earned. It's really hard to weed out good from bad. I mean, I know Saquon Barkley's good. I know it. I'm not sure I could prove it the same way I can prove that Julio Jones is good, for example. But because opportunity works in such a different way. I mean, to your point, everything you guys just said is right. I weigh it, I think of it in my head, but it's not something I can know when to listen to and when not to listen to. And that's what makes running back difficult. For an example, the arguments I was having when Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones were drafted was Aaron Jones is better, but Jamal Williams can pass block, which, like you said, is still true, just kind of doesn't matter when Aaron Jones is better, but sometimes it goes the other way. So I don't know. That's why I keep asking you guys about this stuff. I ask everyone because I can't find a way to know which one of these narratives to listen to in each individual circumstance. You're right about Madison, though. I forgot he'd had the opportunity so many times and it's never quite come through.
No, it's like we want him to be great because he looks really good in a lot of games when he's spelling Dalvin Cook. But when he's on his own, man, it hasn't worked out yet.
Capri Bibbs is the running back that missed the block.
Right.
That
I was hoping you didn't find that.
There we go.
It seems like so much to lay a player's name.
Well, I mean, his career is done because of that. I mean, if you think about it, he hasn't had a career anywhere else. I mean, pass blocking is the most important thing a running back can do. That's why Frank Gore has been in the league for so long, because he is such a proficient pass blocker. And then if you can't, like all running back coaches say, if you can't pass block, he can't play.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's go ahead and move on, guys, here in the interest of time. Our second segment, what to do if you have a first round bye. So, Peter, I want to kick it to you first. Are there any strategies that you employ when you have a first round bye?
I really did think about this question in the 5 minutes of preparation I did, just to out myself while also trying to defend myself at the same time. I'm not sure how you mean. Like, you can't do anything on a first round bye. However, dynasty wise, I do have a take that, again, we were recently talking about on the open bar, randomly enough, that all this came up on that episode too. I think we underrate how much we should push for the win if we're in a winning situation. And if you have a bye, you have a good team, unless some really fun, exciting, unexpected stuff happened, which means you should really not sell out, but be willing to bleed value for the purposes of trying to secure that win. I mean, we talk about how you have a 1 in 12 in a 12-team league chance of actually winning. And if you're in a good league where the other players are also active and, listening to the same information you are, it's really actually rarer than we admit that you get a chance to win. So, for example, bleeding some value to secure Mike Davis would have been a good move last week, apparently, or even right now. Not necessarily your handcuff, but one of these running backs you're convinced of will be good in the right situation. And Santiago in the chat's pointing out a stat that apparently says exactly what we're saying, so I now have to investigate that. Called PPO times XD, so thanks for that. I'm going to go try and find out what that is. But that's a dynasty move I would make if I had a first round bye. So you've got a little bit of leeway to try and make some extra moves. Try and get rid of depth for players that you will start when you come back. Does that answer it at all?
I kind of, yeah. If that's how you view it, Nader, what about you?
I think the best thing you could do is stack quote unquote non-skill position players. Like right now, you kind of know who's going to be in your starting positions. So you kind of know these guys, I have these running backs, I have wide receivers. So I'm not taking them out. They got me here. So you might as well keep, a backup just in case they're injured, a replacement running back and a replacement wide receiver. But,
sure.
Unless you have, like a Kyle Allen or a Josh Allen or a Kyler Murray, something like that, then you may be on the potential of streaming quarterbacks. So you might want to look onto your week 15 or 16 matchups for quarterbacks, see if you have a better option. Or, look at your week 15 or 16 defenses, see if you have a better option. Or you can go, instead of the investment routes, is which I call it, you can go on the handcuffs route, or just pick up everybody's handcuff running backs. So just in case, your opponent's running back gets injured, you currently have the new starter, or you can be the safer route, pick up your own team's handcuffs. And then that way, even if your guy goes down, you still have somebody in turn. I think for a dynasty, it's a little bit harder because, for example, Peter, I have the Niners defense in dynasty. And of course, with all the injuries, they're rendering pretty difficult to start. So I'm currently streaming defenses, and right now I have Washington defense going against the Niners this week. So I would have to think do I stream a defense or do I drop another, because in Dynasty you have a lot of investments in players. So you kind of have to consider, would I drop another investment for a defense, or should I keep streaming what I have?
No, essentially my point is we should get more redrafty if we're in a position to win. And it's a season of backups and matchups. And like you said, I even forgot DST was a bigger thing in redraft, because we have IDP players, or we just don't have defense in most of my Dynasty leagues. So yeah, that's a good point. I remember doing that back in the day when I played more redraft. It was to start having multiple defenses because you don't need that depth anymore.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Yeah, Nader, I like what you were saying is who's gotten you there. Who's going to be in your starting lineup. You don't need 3 backup wide receivers on your bench. You can release some of those. You can pick up that streaming quarterback for week 15, or you can pick up a handcuff. One of the strategies that I like to do is not only, I talked about this with Chad Henne. I like to pick up a quarterback who I know will step in for the starter if the starter gets hurt. But what I also do is, you have that first round bye. You can see you're going to play the winner of this matchup the next week. You need to look at both of those two teams. You need to look at that matchup and look at all the players playing and the benches on both sides and say, okay, if this team wins, I think this team is going to win. If this team wins and they have injuries, who are they most likely to pick up? Who do they need? What position do they have to replace? And then attack it that way. So it's not really necessary for my own team. It's for making my future competitor, my opponent in the next week, have a harder time.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to kind of help yourself and hurt the enemy. I think that tactic is great. Mr. Reed says you should just drop defenses altogether. So no, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think you should drop defenses. I think you should combine the kicker and the defense together. So considering they're both basically special teams, and if your special team score, the defense gets the points, you might as well just combine them together. I think the kicker should be a part of the defense. That's the way even bad teams have some sort of defensive value, because like the Falcons, they have young Hoku, so that intensifies picking up the Falcons defense. That way you have their defense that could potentially get you points, and then you have young Hoku. Considering when you pick up a defense, you're basically kind of like golf. Like their score is just going to consistently go down after, unless you get a lucky touchdown. I think that's the best way to do it. And then with the extra slot you free up, you can probably put in like a flex. But I don't know if any leagues actually have that where you can combine a kicker and a defense.
I don't understand that. I never did for kickers. But anyway, not to get into that whole debate. I guess where you have a first round bye, if we're going full on toxic mode, you can use that free moves of waiver wire just to tie up players that you can drop literally before the next waiver wire deadline, so they can't add them back to their team if they're going to need a start. You can even just tie up defenses that have a good matchup in week 14. You can tie up defenses or kickers for that matter if they're in your league. If you ban them and send them to the moon or not, you can tie them up. And because you don't have to set a lineup, you can use those depth spots just to make sure whoever's facing you next week can't add them.
Up 6 defenses.
Or kickers, just tie them up and drop them in a way that they're not going to be add them. Hopefully back for their next.
That's toxic. I love it.
That's an ethical
I love it.
dilemma.
If we're going full on, let's just screw the other team, then just screw them.
That's
they
toxic.
have to,
I love
they
it.
have to add a new defense or a new kicker for this week. Let them do that, but screw their next week up.
Did you guys ever watch The League?
I seen like an episode or two of it. I haven't been able to.
There's that episode where Ruxin picks up all of the defenses off the waiver wire the night before Sunday, and then the next day has a meeting to. I think it's kind of like an open house party to get his son into like the rabbi school. Mm-hmm. Or the rabbi elementary school or daycare or something like that. And then the rabbi finds out that he did that. It's like, is that ethical? And he says no. I don't know. It's pretty funny.
The thing to remember about it is because you have a bye week, it makes it exponentially more possible because because they get held. You're not allowed to add them for a few hours or a day after you drop someone. So, and where you're wanting to stack up depth that not many people are going to be stacking up, you can add those players after that anyway.
That's a shitty thing to do, man.
Yeah, you're trying to tie them up for next week, not this week. This week's doesn't matter.
Man, well, let's go ahead and move on because I feel like we're not going to come to an agreement on this. I think doing that is pretty shady, but hey, if your league allows it, then by all means. Let's move to our last segment here, fellas. Playoff streaming defenses. So I'm talking about, we just talked about, I don't think you should pick up 6 defenses, but I do have 2 in particular who you might want to pick up right now. Nader, I don't know how many you have. Peter, I don't know how many you have, but I'll kick it to you first, Peter. Since you are our special guest this episode, give me 1 or 2 or as many as you have defenses that would be great to stream through the playoffs.
I don't have any. I'm sorry. I don't play in any leagues with the DST position anymore, and so I honestly haven't been keeping track of it.
Well, that makes sense.
Nothing. I will say I happen to know something about schedules. I mean, David Montgomery, has got a killer schedule through the next few weeks, so that probably means since he's a running back that the Tennessee defense is a pretty good ad.
Could be. Nader, what do you think?
So if you're playing this week, I'm going to recommend you play Washington football team. Oh, almost slipped there. Defense, they're owned in 32% of leagues right now. They go against the Niners, like we mentioned, who have a weak offensive line, backup quarterback. And it just so happens they're a football team. They were able to knock out the undefeated Steelers, and they have a good defense in themselves. So it's not like you're chasing a good matchup. You have a good defense in a good matchup.
And I think this week, if they're out there, Seattle against the Jets, I was looking more towards the next couple weeks. The Buffalo Bills play the Broncos in week 15. I think that's a pretty great matchup. The Bills have a good defense as is. Drew Lock sucks. So I think that's a good play. And then the Eagles played the Cowboys in week 16. And the Cowboys, they've been turning the ball over a ton. Andy Dalton, not great. I think you can definitely play the Eagles in week 16 in the championship game. And I've already picked them up in one of my leagues just for week 16, thinking I'm going to make the playoffs or I'm going to make the championship.
Green Bay plays Carolina week 15. I try to stick to defenses that actually can get you potential and points. Green Bay, they have a Zadarius Smith, they have a Jair Alexander, they got a pretty decent secondary. I'm trying to look at defenses that have good matchups, but have an actual point of defense. Would I play Miami Dolphins against KC? No. Mahomes, he doesn't throw interceptions. He doesn't take sacks.
That's actually what I was just typing out. You don't want defenses that allow less points. You want ones that can allow as many points as you want, but cause pressures, sacks, and interceptions. Yep. You don't want less points.
As long as Taysom Hill is the quarterback for the Saints, you can play a defense against the Saints. They can put up points for sure, but Taysom Hill takes a lot of sacks.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
He gets dropped behind the line a lot.
I'm not dropping the Dolphins defense, but I'm not throwing them.
You're not playing them against the best offense in the league.
Mm-hmm. And it just goes, just a quick stat. There was a list of odd players or starts that most majority of players have that made playoffs. If you own the Dolphins defense, then you had a 54% chance of making playoffs this year, which is, I think it was 13th highest.
How many people owned the Dolphins defense going into the season?
3%.
Probably less than 5. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be a Dolphins fan to do that, and even then, it was pretty difficult to justify that.
And finally, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Come prop up with us on Thrive Fantasy. It is a DFS app for player prop bets. For the NFL, they have all kinds of sports. For the NFL, you choose 10 out of 20 player prop options to build your lineup. The riskier the pick, the more points it's worth. You earn the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Use promo code SLEEPERS with an S when you sign up today, and you'll receive an instant $20 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy from the App Store or Play Store, and when you use promo code SLEEPERS, email a screenshot of that to us at sleeperwire@gmail.com, and it will automatically get you into a 2021 Sleeper Wire Listener League. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Thursday episode. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and follow you and support you?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, guys. I was talking to George in the chat again. Yeah, I really enjoyed being on. It was great to meet you, and absolutely amazing to get a chance to talk to you. You can find me on dynastyleaguefootball.com. That's where most of my articles get posted. I have a Patreon and a YouTube page like everyone else in the world at this point. But yeah, my @ is PA Howdy, and I normally live on Twitter. So @ PA Howdy. You can pretty much find me there 24 hours a day. I need to get a life. But until I do that, I'm here to talk about football whenever you want.
Hell yes. Nader, what about you?
You can basically the same as Peter. I'm at Twitter, @TopTierTactics_. I'm a little new there, so bear with me. I'm trying to figure out how that works out. You guys could listen to my own podcast that I have with my co-host at Top Tier Tactics Fantasy Football. There is mostly a roast session with some football included. Today, we kind of just vented about Christian McCaffrey for a good 20 minutes before we got into the show. So if you like that kind of stuff, well, then you should check us out.
And I was told by his co-host to go screw myself because he's a Raiders fan and I'm a Colts fan. And
this was a specific message. He wanted to make sure I relay to you.
They're going to crush the Raiders this week.
He asked me on the final score for that game. I told him it was going to be Colts 27, Raiders 20.
No, I think the Colts are going to win by 40.
I mean, with the Raiders defense, I wouldn't be surprised. But
Colts 38, Raiders 17.
I mean, if you have to think about it, I mean, Phillip Rivers played the Raiders twice a year, so he knows them a little bit better. But at the same time, the Raiders know him a little bit better.
Yeah, that's the homer in me. You can follow me on Twitter at prof_ChrisSW and the Sleeper Wire Show on Twitter at Sleeper Wire Show. Peter, thanks again for joining Nader and I this week. It was a lot of fun. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for participating in the chats. We will catch you all next week.
Good luck, everybody.